You never really see insecurity until it starts to eat away at someone you love. It doesn't arrive like a storm, it seeps in slowly, disguised as silence. I learned that from my stepson, Ethan. When I first married Claire, Ethan was 15, a quiet boy with polite manners and the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. He called me Mark instead of Dad, which I never corrected. He didn't owe me that word. Still, I hoped time would soften the edges between us. Our home was small but peaceful, a single-story house with creaking floors and sun-stained curtains that smelled faintly of lavender. Claire worked long shifts at the hospital, while I managed a local construction firm. Evenings were our family's rhythm, her laughter from the kitchen, the TV murmuring in the background, Ethan half listening while scrolling on his phone. On the surface, it looked like we'd found balance. Underneath, there was distance, thin, invisible, and growing. Ethan wasn't unkind, just uncertain. Every decision, no matter how small, seemed to carry the weight of judgment. He'd hesitate before answering questions, as though searching for the right version of himself. I saw a reflection of my younger self in that, trying too hard to be enough. But Ethan's uncertainty wasn't about grades or friends. It was deeper, rooted in something only time and loss could explain. His father had died when he was 9. Claire rarely spoke of him, not out of avoidance but out of pain. I didn't push her to. Some memories are sacred, even when they hurt. But I noticed the way Ethan stiffened whenever his father's name surfaced, like hearing it reopened a wound that never healed. He didn't want a replacement. He wanted the impossible, his father back, his world untouched. I tried to meet him where he was. Weekend projects, fixing the shed, changing the car oil, small gestures that gave us quiet time together. Sometimes he'd ask questions about tools, about life, about how I knew his mom. I'd answer carefully, watching his guarded expression. But just when I thought we were building trust, something would pull him back inside himself. That shift came after his breakup with a girl from school. He didn't tell us at first, but I overheard the argument on the phone, his voice shaking, then silent. The next morning, his room was spotless, his smile practiced. "I'm fine," he said. He wasn't. From that point on, the laughter faded from his side of the house. He started spending more time alone, headphones in, meals skipped. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his reflection, adjusting his shirt, muttering under his breath. I didn't pry. I thought giving him space was respect, not distance. I was wrong. Claire noticed the tension too, but she believed it was just teenage moodiness. "He'll come around," she'd say, brushing it off with a smile. I wanted to believe her. But late at night, I'd find Ethan awake, scrolling through his phone, face dimly lit by the screen. I once glimpsed a message he hadn't meant me to see, a text to a friend that read, "I think mom's too good for him." That one line hit harder than I expected. It wasn't anger, it was fear. The fear that his mother would get hurt again. Around that time, I started getting more calls from work. New projects, late meetings, a few text messages I kept private to avoid interruptions at dinner. I thought I was protecting our peace. Ethan thought I was hiding something. One night, I caught him watching me, his eyes sharp, searching. The trust that had begun to form between us had quietly turned into suspicion. I didn't understand it then, but in his mind, every unanswered text, every quiet phone call, was proof. That was the night the silence changed. It wasn't distance anymore, it was doubt. And once doubt takes root, love, any kind of love, starts to suffocate. The first time I realized something was truly wrong was the morning Ethan stopped saying good morning. It seemed small, almost trivial, but silence has a way of echoing when it replaces warmth. He'd drift through the kitchen without meeting my eyes, pour his coffee, and vanish before I could ask how he was doing. Claire chalked it up to teenage moods again, but I could feel something shifting beneath the surface, an undercurrent of resentment. He'd stop joining us for dinner too. "Not hungry," he'd say, though the untouched plates told another story. Some nights I'd hear his door slam right after my phone rang. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then, one evening, as I returned from a late meeting, I saw the curtain in his room fall shut, quick and guilty, as if he'd been watching. That night, Claire asked if everything was okay. I wanted to reassure her, but my words felt heavier than truth should be. He's fine, I said. But the lie hung between us like fog. The following week, the tension broke. I was at a small cafe downtown, going over renovation plans with Julia, a co-worker who'd been helping me arrange a surprise for Claire. I wanted to renew our wedding vows, something simple but meaningful. Julia knew the florist and the venue owner, and we were finalizing details when I noticed someone outside the window. Ethan. He was standing across the street, pretending to check his phone, though his gaze never left me. When our eyes met, he looked away and disappeared into the crowd. My chest tightened with a feeling I couldn't name, something between confusion and dread. That night, Ethan didn't come home for dinner again. Claire looked worried but didn't call him. She trusted him to handle his emotions. I wish I'd done the same. The confrontation came 2 days later. We were all at the dinner table. Claire had made her favorite soup, trying to bring everyone together again. The moment seemed peaceful, until Ethan set his phone on the table, screen glowing, and said, "Do you want to tell her, or should I?" Claire froze. "Tell me what?" He turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a picture, me, sitting across from Julia, smiling. It was cropped tight enough to make it look intimate. Ethan's voice trembled with anger. "He's cheating on you, Mom." I saw him. The world seemed to stop. The air thickened, heavy with disbelief. Claire's hand went to her mouth. "Mark." My instinct was to speak, to explain, but no words came out. I knew the truth. I knew the reason. But in that moment, every explanation sounded like an excuse. The pain in Ethan's eyes was too raw to cut through with logic. "Ethan," I began softly, "that's not what it looks like." He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "Then what is it? You've been sneaking around, whispering on the phone, coming home late. You think I don't see it?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Mark, please, just tell me the truth." I could have cleared it up right then. I could have said Julia's helping me plan something for you. But pride, or maybe shock, took over. I stayed silent, trying to calm Ethan's anger before speaking. It was a mistake. Silence, in that moment, sounded like guilt. Ethan stormed out before I could reach him. The front door slammed, the echo of it swallowing Claire's sob. She turned to me, voice breaking. "Tell me it isn't true." "It's not," I said, but my voice was too late, too thin to matter. That night, she slept in Ethan's room, waiting for him to come home. I stayed awake in the living room, the house quiet except for the rain tapping the windows. Somewhere between those raindrops, I realized that truth doesn't always save you. Sometimes, it just comes too late to be believed. The night after Ethan's accusation, the house felt hollow. Every sound carried farther than it should have. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, Claire's quiet movements upstairs. It wasn't just silence anymore, it was absence, thick and deliberate. Ethan didn't come home that night. Claire stayed by the window, phone in hand, waiting for a message that never arrived. I watched her face under the lamplight, the reflection of her phone screen in her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of doubt had shrunk her spirit. And I couldn't blame her. To her, the evidence was there. To Ethan, the betrayal was already real. Around midnight, I went to my study. The folder with the vow renewal plans still sat on my desk, venue photos, receipts, and a handwritten list titled, "What She Deserves." I had written it weeks ago, late one night when I couldn't sleep. It wasn't about guilt or obligation, it was love in its quietest form. The list started with, "Flowers from her mother's garden," and ended with, "Make her laugh again." I should have told her the truth sooner. But I'd wanted it to be a surprise, something beautiful. Instead, it had turned into proof of betrayal. The next morning, I called Julia. My voice cracked as I explained what had happened. She was stunned. "Mark, I can talk to Claire if you want," she offered, but I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. "No, this is my mess. I'll fix it." Hours later, Ethan finally returned. His eyes were red, his expression guarded. Claire rushed to him, but he brushed past her and went straight to his room. I followed after a moment, pausing at the door before knocking softly. He didn't answer, but I spoke anyway. "Ethan, I know you think you're protecting your mom. I would, too, if I were you. But you've got it wrong. The door opened just a crack. His voice was rough, barely controlled. Then tell me the truth. I took a slow breath. Her birthday's next month. I was planning something for her, something special. The woman you saw, Julia, she's helping me organize it. That's all. He looked at me, eyes narrowing, searching my face for cracks in the story. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to see that lying wouldn't help me right now, I said quietly. If I wanted to hide something, I wouldn't have met her in public. For a long moment, he just stared. Then, his shoulders slumped. He looked tired, older somehow. I thought you were going to hurt her. I'd never do that, I said. Not to her, not to you. He didn't respond, but he didn't close the door either. I took that as something, maybe the smallest step toward trust. Later that evening, Claire came to me. Her voice was soft, hesitant. I saw your notes, she said. She held the list I'd left on the desk. The flowers, the vows, her eyes shimmered, not with accusation but regret. You were planning all this for me. I nodded. It was supposed to be a surprise. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she sank into my arms. I'm sorry, Mark. I should have trusted you. I shook my head. No, you trusted what you saw. That's human. Upstairs, a door creaked. Ethan lingered at the top of the stairs, listening. When Claire turned, he came down slowly, shame written all over his face. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to ruin everything. His voice broke. I didn't want to lose her again. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. Then maybe we stop assuming loss before it happens. He nodded, eyes glassy, and for the first time in months, I saw a hint of peace on his face. That night, for the first time in a long while, the house felt warm again, not perfect, but human. The next few days passed quietly, as though the house itself was trying to recover. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just the steady rhythm of ordinary life slowly returning. The tension that had filled every corner had softened, replaced by the fragile peace that follows an apology. Ethan spent more time downstairs now. He didn't say much, but he didn't hide either. Small gestures spoke louder than words. A mug left next to mine in the morning, the faint sound of his music bleeding through the wall instead of complete silence. Claire, too, seemed lighter. The shadows under her eyes faded as the laughter returned to her voice. But underneath it all, there was still the faint echo of what almost broke us. Trust, once cracked, never returns untouched. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The sun was setting, spilling amber light through the kitchen window. Claire was chopping vegetables, humming softly. Ethan sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. It was a simple scene, yet something in it felt sacred, like the universe was offering us another chance. Can I talk to you both for a minute? I asked. Ethan looked up, cautious but attentive. Claire smiled faintly. Of course. I set a small envelope on the table. This was supposed to be a surprise, I began, but I think we could all use a little honesty now. Inside were 3 invitations, simple white cards with gold lettering. Vow renewal, Saturday, 7 p.m. At home. Claire's hand trembled as she picked one up. You still want to do this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. More than ever, I said. Because the point of vows isn't that we keep them perfectly. It's that we keep trying, even when we stumble. Her eyes glistened, and she nodded slowly. Ethan's gaze shifted between us, guilt and hope tangled in his expression. You really planned all this, he murmured. I smiled. With a little help. But it only works if you're both there. That Saturday, the 3 of us stood in the backyard beneath the same string lights we'd hung years ago. There were no guests, no fancy decorations, just us, and the quiet hum of crickets in the grass. Claire wore a soft blue dress, the same one from our first anniversary. Ethan stood beside her, holding a small bouquet he'd picked himself. When I took Claire's hands, the world around us faded. We've been through worse storms than this, I said. But somehow, every time, we find our way back. Maybe that's what love really is, not the promise that nothing will go wrong, but the faith that we'll fix it together when it does. Quote. Claire smiled through her tears. You always know what to say, she whispered. Ethan cleared his throat. Can I say something? We both turned to him. He looked nervous, but determined. I spent so long thinking love meant never getting hurt. But I was wrong. It's not about avoiding pain, it's about trusting someone enough to heal from it together. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Claire stepped forward and pulled him into her arms. I joined them, the three of us wrapped in a silence that finally felt peaceful. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Claire and I sat outside, watching the stars. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Do you think he'll be okay? I nodded. He's learning what love really means. We all are. She smiled, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe this was the renewal we needed, not vows, but understanding. The wind moved softly through the trees. I looked up at the sky and thought about everything we'd almost lost, the trust, the laughter, the quiet moments we'd taken for granted. You know, I said, people think betrayal ends love. But sometimes, what feels like betrayal is just fear wearing a different name. Claire squeezed my hand, and fear only fades when someone stays. In that moment, I realized that staying, through doubt, through misunderstanding, through the fragile work of rebuilding, was the truest form of love we'd ever spoken.